Hello, ladies and gentlemen, boils and ghouls, guys and gals, and non binary pals. Welcome to another exciting episode of The Gentleman Psychic. Today, we are going to continue our reading of Speak of the Devil. We've got just a couple of minutes before we actually begin the stream, so we're going to wait for the clock. That means that you at home, those of you who are watching, can go get something nice to drink. I've brought a nice vintage bottle of arsenic for my drinking pleasure. Hello, Laura. Hello, Christy. Hello, Anne. Hello. Arsenic is so good for the body. So bring your babies, bring your princesses, bring your dollies, bring your dogs, bring your cats, bring yourself. Get a nice blanket and time to snuggle in. Hello, my friend, Di Lasaro. Hello, sweet Ciara. Hello, Amy. Ms. Whiskey. Hello, hello. You did. Mary Jane King, good evening. Suzette, hello, good evening. We're going to wait just one more moment. We want to, of course, let you gather yourself so that you can be in a nice, comfortable position so that we can have story time. And of course, as always, we will wait for the clock. And we like to have that nice little chime at the beginning. We've only got about 30 seconds of that. So now is the time to quickly run, wash your hands, grab your popcorn, grab your loved one, and be ready because we are about to begin story time. Oh, here it is. Why is it arsenic? Well, people say pick your poison, and my poison is arsenic. But don't worry, those of you who are thinking that maybe you ought to go out and try some arsenic, it's very hard to find these days. Mine is diet arsenic. By diet, I mean it's mostly water. And by mostly water, I mean it's actually just water. All right. And now, my darlings, a little update. So for me, I did that charity event in Oyster Bay, and it was beautiful. We raised some money for the museum, which was lovely. My tables were fabulous. Everyone's tables were fabulous. I was honored to be part of that. And what happened to tea? Oh, I still drink tea, my dear. I still definitely drink tea, but it's 9 o'clock in the evening here, so I think tea in the evening might be a little bit too much for me. It would keep my tired eyes awake even more. So we don't want that. Sweet Ciara 95 is under the weather. I'm so sorry, but I'm glad you're here, my dear. What else? Oh, I wanted to tell you that I've got some plans coming up. I will be in Los Angeles in September, the first week of September, and I will be in Atlanta the last week of September. We're working on some things. You're all going to be invited, so I'll let you know as the time progresses. We are looking for, in those areas, we are looking for vendors, people who would like to come and sell your wares. So if you're a maker and you would like to be in one of these, come and find me, message me, and I would love to have you. Saw Runner, first time I caught your stream. Usually don't stay up this late. Hello from Ukraine. Hello, welcome. I am honored that you are here. Thank you so much. I know it is rather late for you. Those of you who are in Europe, it is rather late, but I appreciate that you are here. And I suppose, my darlings, without further ado, I suppose we can go ahead and get right into story time. What do you say? I think so. As you know, we are reading Speak of the Devil, classic novels, and of course, with a cover that was drawn by Salvador Dali. Speak of the Devil. Hello, Beau. Bottle Party by John Collier. Franklin Fletcher dreamed of luxury in the form of tiger skins and beautiful women. He was prepared, at a pinch, to forego the tiger skins. Unfortunately, the beautiful women seemed equally rare and inaccessible. At his office and at his boarding house, the girls were mere mice, or were puddingly girls, or swarthy, or had insufficiently read the advertisements. He met no others. At 35, he gave up and decided he must console himself with a hobby, which is a very miserable second best. He prowled about in odd corners of the town, looking in the windows of antique dealers and junk shops, wondering what on earth he might collect. He came upon a poor shop in a poor alley, in whose dusty window stood a single object. It was full-rigged ship in a bottle. Feeling rather like that himself, he decided to go in and ask of the price. The shop was small and bare. Some shabby racks were ranged about the walls, and these racks bore a large number of bottles of every shape and size, containing a variety of objects which were interesting only because they were in bottles. While Franklin still looked about, a little door opened, and out shuffled the proprietor, a wizened old man in a smoking cap, who seemed mildly surprised and mildly pleased to have a customer. He showed Franklin bouquets and birds of paradise and the Battle of Gettysburg and miniature Japanese gardens and even a shrunken human head, all stopped up in bottles. "And what," said Frank, "are those down there at the bottom shelf?" "They are not much to look at," said the old man. "A lot of people think they're nonsense, really. Personally, I like them." He lugged out a few specimens from their dusty obscurity. One seemed to have nothing but a little dried-up fly in it. Others contained what might have been horsehairs or straws, or mere wisps of heaven knows what. Some appeared to be filled with grey or opalescent smoke. "They are," said the old man, "various sorts of genii, jinns, sibyls, demons, and such things. Some of them, I believe, are much harder even than a full-rigged ship to get into a bottle." "Oh, but come, this is New York," said Frank. "All the more reason," said the old man, "to expect the most extraordinary gins in bottles. I will show you. Wait a moment. The stopper is a little stiff." "What is this one like?" asked Frank. "Ah, this one," said the old man, desisting in the efforts of and holding the bottle up to the light. "This one, oh, good heavens, my eyes are getting weak. I very nearly undid the wrong bottle. A very ugly customer indeed. Dear me. It's just as well I didn't get that stopper undone. I'd better put him right back in the rack. I must remember he's in the back right-hand corner. I'll stick a label on him one of these days. Here's something more harmless." "What's in that?" said Frank. "Supposed to be the most beautiful girl in the world," said the old man. "All right, if you like that sort of thing. Myself, I've never troubled to undo her. I'll find something more interesting." "Well, from a scientific point of view," said Frank, "Oh, no, no," said the old man. "Talking of science, look at this." He held up one which contained a tiny mummified insect-looking object, just visible through the grime. "Put your ear to it," he said. Frank did so. He heard in a sort of whistling nothing of a voice the words, "Louisiana Lad, Saratoga, 4:15, Louisiana Lad, Saratoga, 4:15, repeated over and over and over again. "What on earth is that?" said he. "That," said the old man, "is the original Cumean Sibyl. Very interesting. She's taken up racing." "Very interesting," said Frank. "All the same, I'd just like to see the other. I adore beauty." "A bit of an artist, eh?" said the old man. "Believe me, what you really want is a good, all-around, serviceable type. Here's one, for example. I recommend this little fellow. From personal experience, he's practical. He can fix you anything." "Well, if that's so," said Frank, "why haven't you got a palace, tiger skins, and all that?" "I had all that," said the old man, "and he fixed it. Yes, this was my first bottle, and the rest came from him. First of all, I had a palace, pictures, marbles, slaves, and you say tiger skins? I had him put up Cleopatra on one of them." "What was she like?" cried Frank. "All right," said the old man, "if you like that sort of thing. I got bored with it. I thought to myself, what I'd like, really, is a little shop with all sorts of things in bottles. So I had him fix it. He got me this Sybil. He got me the ferocious fellow here. In fact, he got me all of them." "And now he's in there?" asked Frank. "Yes, he's in there," said the old man. "Listen to him." Frank put his ear to the bottle, and he heard, uttered in the most plaintive tones, "Let me out! Do let me out! Please let me out! I'll do anything! Let me out! I'm harmless! Please let me out! Just for a little while! Do let me out! I'll do anything, please!" Frank looked at the old man. "He's there, all right," he said. "He's there." "Of course he's there," said the old man. "I wouldn't sell you an empty bottle. What do you take me for? In fact, I wouldn't sell you this one at all, for the sentimental reasons only. I've had this shop a good many years now, and you're my very first customer." Frank put his ear to the bottle again. "Let me out! Let me out! Oh, please let me out! I say," said Frank, "does he go on like that all the time?" "Oh, very probably," said the old man. "I can't say I listen. I prefer the radio." "It seems rather tough on him," said Frank sympathetically. "Maybe," said the old man. "They don't seem to like bottles, personally. I do. They fascinate me. For example, I—" "Tell me," said Frank, "is he really harmless?" "Oh, my, yes," said the old man. "Bless you, yes. Some say they're tricky Eastern blood and all that. I never found him so. I used to let him out. He'd do his stuff, and then back he'd go again. I must say he's very efficient." "He could get me something." "Absolutely anything." "And how much do you want for him?" said Frank. "Oh, I don't know," said the old man. $10 million, perhaps." "I say, I haven't got that. Still, if he's as good as you say, I could pay you on the installment system." "Oh, don't worry. Give me $5. I've got all I want, really. Shall I wrap him up for you?" Frank paid over his $5 and hurried home with a precious bottle, terrified of breaking it. As soon as he was in the room, he pulled the stopper, and out flowed a prodigious quantity of greasy smoke, which immediately solidified into the figure of a gross and fleshy Oriental, 6 feet and 6 in height, with rolls of fat, a hook nose, and wicked white to his eye. Vast double chins, altogether like a film producer, only larger. Frank, striving desperately for something to say, ordered shashlik, kebab, and Turkish delight. There were immediately forthcoming. Frank, having recovered his balance, noted that these modest offerings were of surpassing quality, and set upon dishes of solid gold, superbly engraved and polished to a dazzling brightness. It is by little details of this description that one may recognize a really first-rate servant. Frank was delighted, but restrained his enthusiasm. "Gold plate," said he, "are all very well. Let us, however, get down to the brass tacks. I should like a palace." To hear, said his dusky henchman, is to obey. It should, said Frank, be of suitable size, suitably situated, suitably furnished, suitable pictures, suitable marbles, hangings, and all that. I should like there to be large number of tiger skins. I am very fond of tiger skins. They shall all be there, said the slave. I am, said Frank, a bit of an artist, as your late owner remarked. My art, so to speak, demands the presence upon these tiger skins of a number of young women, some blonde, some brunette, some petite, some Junoesque, some languorous, some vivacious, all beautiful, and they need not be overdressed. I hate overdressing, it is vulgar. Have you got that? I have, said the gin. Then, said Frank, let me have it. Condensed only, said his servant, to close his eyes for the space of a single minute, and opening them, you shall find yourself surrounded by the agreeable objects you have described. Okay, said Frank, but no tricks, mind. He closed his eyes as requested. A low, musical humming, whooshing sound rose and fell about him. At the end of the minute he looked round, and there were the arches, pillars, marbles, hangings, etc., of the most exquisite palace imaginable. And wherever he looked, he saw a tiger skin, and on every tiger skin there reclined a young woman of surpassing beauty, who was certainly not vulgarly overdressed. Our good Frank was, to put it mildly, in an ecstasy. He darted to and fro like a honey bee in the florist's shop. He was received everywhere with smiles sweet beyond description, and with glances of an open or veiled responsiveness. Here were blushes and lowered lids. There was a flaming face of ardor. Here was the shoulder turned, but by no means a cold shoulder. Here were open arms, and such arms! Here was love disassembled, but vainly disassembled. Here was love triumphant. I must say, said Frank, at a later hour, I have spent really delightful afternoon. I have enjoyed it thoroughly. Then may I crave, said the gin, who was at that moment serving him his supper, may I crave the boon of being allowed to act as your butler, and as your general minister of your pleasure, instead of being returned to that abominable bottle? I don't see why not, said Frank. It certainly seems rather tough that after having fixed all this up, you should be crammed back into that bottle again. Very well, act as my butler, but understand, whatever the convection may be, I wish you never to enter a room without knocking, and above all, no tricks. The gin, with a soapy smile of gratitude, withdrew, and Frank shortly retired to his harem, where he passed the evening as pleasantly as he had passed the afternoon. Some weeks went by, entirely filled with these agreeable pastimes, till Frank, in obedience to a law which not even the most efficient of gins can set aside, found himself growing a little over-particular, a little blasé, a little inclined to criticize and find fault. These, said he to his gin, are very pretty young creatures, if you like that sort of thing, but I imagine they can hardly be first-rate, or I should feel more interest in them. I am, after all, the connoisseur. Nothing can please me but the very best. Take them away. Roll up all the tiger skins but one. It shall be done, said the gin. Behold, it is accomplished. And on that remaining tiger skin, said Frank, put me Cleopatra herself. The next moment, Cleopatra was there, looking, it must be admitted, absolutely superb. Hello, she said. Here I am on the tiger skin again. Again, cried Frank, suddenly reminded of the old man in the shop. Here, take her back. Bring me Helen of Troy. Next moment, Helen of Troy was here. "Hello," she said. "Here I am on the tiger skin again." "Again!" cried Frank. "Damn that old man! Take her away. Bring me Queen Guinevere." Guinevere said exactly the same thing. So did Madame de Pompadour, Lady Hamilton, and every other famous beauty that Frank could think of. No wonder, said he, that the old man was such an extremely wizened old man. The old fiend, the old devil. He was properly taken the guilt of all the gingerbread. Call me jealous, if you like. I will not play second fiddle to that ugly old rascal. Where shall I find a perfect creature worthy of embraces of such connoisseur as I am? If you are dying to address that question to me, said the gin, let me remind you that there was in that shop a little bottle which my late master had never unstoppered, because I supplied him with it after he had lost interest in matters of this sort. Nevertheless, it has the reputation of containing the most beautiful girl in the world. You are right, cried Frank. Get me that bottle without delay. In a few seconds, the bottle lay before him. You may have the afternoon off, said Frank to the gin. Thank you, said the gin. I will go and see my family in Arabia. I have not seen them for a long time. With that, he bowed and withdrew. Frank turned his attention to the bottle, which he was not long in unstopping. Out came the most beautiful girl you can possibly imagine. Cleopatra and all that lot were hags and frumps compared to her. Where am I? She said. What is this beautiful palace? What am I doing on a tiger skin? Who is this handsome young prince? It is me, cried Frank in rapture. It is me. The afternoon passed like a moment in paradise. Before Frank knew it, the gin was back, ready to serve his supper. Frank must sup with his charmer, for this time it was love, the real thing. The gin, entering with the viands, rolled up his wicked eyes to the sight of so much beauty. It happened that Frank, all love and restlessness, darted out into the garden, two mouthfuls to pluck his beloved a rose. The gin, on the pretense of serving her wine, edged up very closely. I don't know if you remember me, said he in a whisper. I used to be next to you in the bottle. I have often admired you through the glass. Oh, yes, said she, I do remember you to perfection. At that moment Frank returned. The gin could say no more, but he stood about the room, inflating his monstrous chest and showing off his plump and dusky muscles. You need not be afraid of him, said Frank. He's only a gin. Pay no attention to him. Tell me if you really love me. Of course I do, said she. Well, say so. Why don't you say so? I have said so, said she. Of course I do. Isn't that saying so? This vague, evasive reply dimmed all Frank's happiness, as if a cloud had come over the sun. Doubt sprang up in his mind, and entirely ruined moments of exquisite bliss. What are you thinking of? He would say. I don't know, she would reply. Well, you ought to know, he would say, and then a quarrel would begin. Once or twice he even ordered her back into her bottle. She obeyed with a malicious and secretive smile. Why should she give me that sort of a smile, said Frank to the gin, to whom he confided his distress. I cannot tell, replied the gin, unless she has a lover concealed in there. Is it possible? Cried Frank in consternation. It is surprising, said the gin, how much room there is in one of these bottles. Come out, cried Frank. Come out at once. His charmer obediently emerged. Is there anyone else in that bottle? Cried Frank. How could there be? She asked, with a look of rather overdone innocence. Give me a straight answer, said he. Answer me yes or no. Yes or no, she replied, maddeningly. Hell and fury, cried Frank. I'll go and find out for myself. If I find anybody, God help you and him. With that, and with an intense effort of the will, he flowed himself into the bottle, looked all around, and there was no one. Suddenly, he heard the sound above him. He looked up, and there was the stopper being thrust in. "What are you doing?" he cried. "We are putting in the stopper," said the djinn. Frank cursed, begged, prayed, and implored. "Let me out!" he cried. "Let me out! Please let me out! Do let me out! I'll do anything! Let me out! Do!" The djinn, however, had other matters to attend. Frank had the infinite mortification of beholding these other matters through the glassy walls of his prison. Next day he was picked up, whisked through the air, and deposited in dirty little shop among other bottles from which this one had never been missed. There he remained for an interminable period, covered all over with dust and frantic rage of the thought of what was going on in his exquisite palace between his djinn and his faithless charmer. In the end, some sailors happened to drift into the shop, and, hearing this bottle contained the most beautiful girl in the world, they bought it up by general subscription of the it's French, Faucele. When they unstoppered him at the sea and found it was only poor Frank, their disappointment knew no bounds, and they used him with the utmost barbarity. Oh, I liked that one. That was very alluring. Dirty sailors used that poor Frank. Well, he got what he needed. He got what he deserved. I'm going to tell you a story. Oh, maybe I shan't. It is a family show. Oh, maybe I'll tell you. So, do you know what's long, hard, and full of seamen? A submarine. I know. The devil quotes scriptures. The devil quotes scriptures to his own ends. He is in no means a theologian. Theology is to him an open book. He was there. He was the first war correspondent reporting the progress of his own war. Had a saint the slightest quaver of doubt in the course of history, Satan appeared to record it. Had a pope an afterthought concerning some divine command, Satan hastened the council chambers of the Vatican. But the devil was a slow starter. He did not come into his own in the Western world until the Middle Ages, then witch burnings reddened the sky from the Danube to the English Channel, nor did the tight little island neglect the most incredible of all the mass hysterias. England and Scotland contributed their full measure of native fuel to the fire. Let's see, I think this is... The Three Low Masses. A Christmas Story by Alphonse Daudet. 2 truffle turkeys, Carigou. Yes, your reverence, 2 magnificent turkeys stuffed with truffles. I should know something about it, for I myself helped to fill them. One would have said their skin would crack as they were roasting it. Is it stretched? Jesu Maria, I who... This is a lot. This is a lot. Let's see what's the next one. Oh, let's do The Demon Pope. That's more fun. By Richard Garnett. So you won't sell me your soul? Said the devil. Thank you, replied the student. I had rather keep it myself, if it's all the same to you. But it's not all the same to me. I want it very particularly. Come, I'll be liberal. I said 20 years. You have 30. The student shook his head. 40. Another shake. 50. As before. Now, said the devil, I know I'm going to do a foolish thing, but I cannot bear to see a clever-spirited young man throw himself away. I'll make you another kind of offer. We don't have any bargain at present, but I will push you on in the world for the next 40 years. This day, 40 years, I come back and ask you for a boon. not your soul, mind, or anything not perfectly in your power to grant. If you give it, we are quits. If not, I fly away with you. What say you to this?" The student reflected some minutes. "Agreed," said he, at last. Scarcely had the devil disappeared, which he did instantaneously, ere a messenger reined in his smoking steed at the gate of the University of Cordova. The judicious reader will already have remarked that Lucifer could never have been allowed inside a Christian seat of learning, and inquiring for the student, Gerbert presented him with the Emperor Otho's nomination to the abbacy of Bobbio, in consideration, said the document, of his virtue and learning, well nigh miraculous in one so young. Such messengers were frequent visitors during Gerbert's prosperous career. Abbot, bishop, archbishop, cardinal, he was ultimately enthroned Pope on April 2nd, 999, and assumed the appellation of Sylvester II. It was then general belief that the world would come to an end in the following year, a catastrophe which to many seemed the more imminent from the election of a chief pastor whose celebrity as theologian, though not inconsiderable, by no means equaled his reputation as a necromancer. The world, notwithstanding, revolved scatheless through the dreaded 12-month, and early in the first year of the 11th century, Gerbert was sitting peacefully in his study, perusing a book of magic, volumes of algebra, astrology, alchemy, Aristotelian philosophy, and other such light reading filled his bookcase, and on a table stood an improved clock of his invention, next to his introduction of the Arabic numerals, his chief legacy to posterity. Suddenly a sound of wings was heard, and Lucifer stood by his side. "It is a long time," said the fiend, "since I have had the pleasure of seeing you. I have now called to remind you of our little contract concluded this day 40 years. You remember," said Sylvester, "that you are not to ask anything exceeding my power to perform." "I have no such intention," said Lucifer. "On the contrary, I am about to solicit a favor which can be bestowed by you and you alone. You are Pope. I desire that you would make me a cardinal. In the expectation, I presume," returned Gerbert, "of becoming Pope on the next vacancy." "An expectation," replied Lucifer, "which I may most reasonably entertain, considering my enormous wealth, my proficiency in the intrigue, and the present condition of the sacred college." "You would doubtless," said Gerbert, "endeavor to subvert the foundations of faith, and by course of profligacy and licentiousness render the Holy See odious and contemptible." "No, on the contrary," said the fiend, "I would extirpate heresy and all learning and knowledge as inevitably tending thereunto. I would suffer no man to read but the priests, and confine his reading to his breviary. I would burn your books together with your bones on the first convenient opportunity. I would observe an austere propriety of conduct, and be especially careful not to loosen one rivet in the tremendous yoke I was forging for the minds and consciousness of mankind." "If it be so," said Gerbert, "let's be off." "What?" exclaimed Lucifer. "You are willing to accompany me to the infernal regions?" "Assuredly, rather than be accessory to the burning of Plato and Aristotle, and give place to the darkness against which I have been contending all my life." "Gerbert," replied the demon, "this is errant trifling. Now, know you not that no good man can enter my dominions? That which were such a thing possible, my empire would become intolerable to me, and I should be compelled to abdicate." "I do know it," said Gerbert, "and hence I have been able to receive your visit with composure." "Gerbert," said the devil, with tears in his eyes, I put it to you, this is fair. Is this honest? I undertake to promote your interest in the world. I fulfill my promise abundantly. You obtain through my instrumentality a position to which you could never have otherwise aspired. Often have I had a hand in the election of a pope, but never before have I contributed to confer the tiara on one eminent for virtue and learning. You profit by my assistance to the full, and now take advantage of the advantageous circumstances to deprive me of my reasonable guerdon. It is my constant experience that the good people are so much more slippery than the sinners, and drive much harder bargains. Lucifer, answered Gerbert, I have always sought to treat you as a gentleman, hoping that you would approve yourself such in return. I will not inquire whether it was entirely in harmony with this character to seek to intimidate me into compliance with your demand by threatening me with penalty which you well knew could not be enforced. I will overlook this little irregularity and concede even more than you have requested. You have asked to be cardinal. I will make you pope. Ha! Exclaimed Lucifer, and an internal glow suffused his... I can't even talk. An internal glow suffused his sooty hide, as the light of a fading ember is revived by breathing upon it. For 12 hours, continued Gerbert, as the expiration of that time, we will consider the matter further, and if, as I anticipate, you are more anxious to divest yourself to the papal dignity than you were to assume it, I promise to bestow upon you any boon you may ask within my power to grant, and not plainly inconsistent with religion or morals. Done, cried the demon. Gerbert uttered some cabalistic words, and in a moment the apartment held 2 Pope Sylvesters, entirely indistinguishable save by their attire, and the fact that one limped slightly with the left foot. You will find pontifical apparel in this cupboard, said the Gerbert. And, taking his book of magic with him, he retreated through a masked door to a secret chamber. As the door closed behind him, he chuckled and muttered to himself, Poor old Lucifer, sold again. If Lucifer was sold, he did not seem to know it. He approached a large slab of silver which did duty as a mirror, and contemplated his personal appearance with some dissatisfaction. I certainly don't look half as well without my horns, he soliloquized, and I am sure I shall miss my tail most grievously. A tiara and a train, however, made fair amends for the deficient appendages, and Lucifer now looked every inch a pope. He was about to call the master to the ceremonies and summon a consistory when the door was burst open, and 7 cardinals, brandishing poniards, rushed into the room. Down with the sorcerer, they cried, as they seized and gagged him. Death to the Sacrian! Practices algebra and other devilish arts, knows Greek, talks Arabic, reads Hebrew. Burn him! Smother him! Let him be disposed by general council, said a young and inexperienced cardinal. Heaven forbid, said an old and wary one. Sotto voce. Lucifer struggled frantically, but the feeble frame he was doomed to inhabit for the next 11 hours was speedily exhausted. Bound and helpless, he swooned away. Brethren, said one of the senior cardinals, it hath been delivered by the exorcists that a sorcerer or other individual in league with the demon doth usually bear upon his person some visible token of his infernal compact. I propose that we forthwith institute a search for this stigma, the discovery of which may contribute to justify our proceedings in the eyes of the world. I heartily approve of our brother Anno's proposition, said another. The rather as we cannot possibly fail to discover such a mark, if indeed we desire to find it. The search was accordingly instituted, and had not proceeded far ere a simultaneous yell from all of the 7 cardinals indicated that their investigation had brought more light than they had ventured to expect. The Holy Father had a cloven foot. For the next 5 minutes, the cardinals remained utterly stunned, silent, and stupefied with amazement. As they gradually recovered their faculties, it would have become manifest to a nice observer that the Pope had risen very considerably in their good opinion. "This is an affair requiring very mature deliberation," said one. "I always feared that we might be proceeding too precipitately," said another. "It is written, the devils believe," said the third. "The Holy Father, therefore, is not a heretic at any rate." "Brethren," said Anno, "this affair, as our brother Benno well remarks, doth indeed call for mature deliberation. I therefore propose that instead of smothering his holiness with cushions, as originally contemplated, we immure him for the present in the dungeon adjoining hereunto, and, after spending the night in meditation and prayer, resume the consideration of the business tomorrow morning, informing the officials of the palace," said Benno, "that his holiness has retired for his devotions and desires on no account to be disturbed." "A pious fraud," said Anno, "which not one of the fathers would for a moment have scrupled to commit." The cardinals accordingly lifted the still insensible Lucifer and bore him carefully, almost tenderly, to the apartment appointed for his detention. Each would fain have lingered in hopes of his recovery, but each felt that the eyes of his 6 brethren were upon him, and all, therefore, retired simultaneously, each taking a key of the cell. Lucifer regained consciousness almost immediately afterward. He had the most confused idea of the circumstances which had involved him in his present scrape, and could only say to himself that if they were the unusual concomitants of the papal dignity, these were by no means to his taste, and he wished he had been made acquainted with them sooner. The dungeon was not only perfectly dark, but horribly cold, and the poor devil in his present form had no latent store of infernal heat to draw upon. His teeth chattered, he shivered in every limb, and felt devoured with hunger and thirst. There is much probability in the assertion of some of his biographers that it was on this occasion that he invented ardent spirits, but even if he did, the mere conception of a glass of brandy could only increase his sufferings. So the long January night wore wearily on, and Lucifer seemed likely to expire from inanition, when a key turned in the lock, and Cardinal Anno cautiously glided in, bearing a lamp, a loaf, half a cold roast kid, and a bottle of wine. "I trust," he said, bowing courteously, "that I may be excused any slight breach of etiquette, of which I may render myself culpable, from the difficulty under which I labor of determining whether, under present circumstances, your holiness, or your infernal majesty, be the form of the address most befitting me to employ." "Ba-ba-ba-ba-boo," went Lucifer, who still had the gag in his mouth. "Heavens!" exclaimed the cardinal, "I crave your infernal holiness's forgiveness. What a lamentable oversight!" And, relieving Lucifer from his gag and bonds, he set out the reflection upon which the demon fell ferociously. "Why, the devil, if I may so express myself," pursued Anno. "Did not your holiness inform us that you were the devil? Not a hand would then have been raised against you. I have myself been seeking all my life for the audience now happily vouchsafed me. Whence this mistrust of your faithful Anno, who has served you so loyally and zealously these many years?" Lucifer pointed significantly to the gag and fetters. "I shall never forgive myself," protested the cardinal, "for that part I have borne in this unfortunate transaction. Next to ministering to your majesty's bodily necessities, there is nothing I have so much at heart as to express my penitence. But I entreat your majesty to remember that I believed myself to be acting in your majesty's interest by overthrowing a magician who was accustomed to send your majesty upon errands, and who might at any time enclose you in a box and cast you into the sea. It is deplorable that your majesty's most devoted servants should have been this misled. Reasons of state, suggested Lucifer. I trust that they no longer operate, said the cardinal. However, the sacred college is now fully possessed of the whole matter. It is therefore unnecessary to pursue this department of the subject further. I would now humbly crave leave to confer with your majesty, or rather perhaps your holiness, since I am about to speak of spiritual things on the important and delicate point of your holiness's successor. I am ignorant how long your holiness proposes to occupy the apostolic chair, but of course you are aware that public opinion will not suffer you to hold it for a term exceeding that of the pontificate of Peter, a vacancy. Therefore, you must one day occur, and I am humbly to represent that office could not be filled by one more congenial than myself to the present incumbent, or on whom he could more fully rely to carry out in every respect his views and intentions. And the cardinal proceeded to detail various circumstances of his past life, which certainly seemed to corroborate his assertion. He had not, however, proceeded far ere he was disturbed by the grating of another key in the lock, and had just time to whisper impressively, "Beware of Benno." Ere he divided, under a table, Benno was also provided a lamp and wine, and cold vivans warned by other lamp and other remains of Lucifer's repast that some colleague had been beforehand with him. And not knowing how many more might be in the field, he came briefly to the point, regarded the papacy, and preferred his chain in much the same manner as Anno. While he was earnestly cautioning Lucifer against this cardinal as one who could and would cheat the very devil himself, another key in the lock turned, and Benno escaped under the table, where Anno immediately inserted his fingers into his right eye. The little squeal consistent upon this occurrence, Lucifer successfully smothered by a fit of coughing. Cardinal number 3. A Frenchman bore a bayonet ham and exhibited the same disgust as Benno on seeing himself forestalled. So far as his requests transpired, they were moderate, but no one knows where he would have stopped if he had not been scared by the advent of Cardinal number 4. Up to this time, he had only asked of his inexhaustible purse power to call up the devil ad libitum, and ring of invisibility to allow him free access to his mistress, who was unfortunately a married woman. Cardinal number 4 chiefly wanted to be put into the way of poisoning Cardinal number 5, and Cardinal number 5 preferred the same petition as respected to Cardinal number 4. Cardinal number 6, an Englishman, demanded the revision of the Archbishops of Canterbury and York, with the faculty of holding them together and of unlimited non-residence. In the course of his harangue, he made use of the phrase non obstantibus, of which Lucifer immediately took a note. With what the seventh cardinal would have solicited is not known, for he had hardly opened his mouth when the 12th hour expired, and Lucifer, regaining his vigor with his shape, sent the prince of the church spinning to the other end of the room and split the marble table with a single stroke of his tail. The 6 crouched and huddling cardinals cowered, revealed to one another, and at the same time enjoyed the spectacle of his holiness darting through the stone ceiling, which yielded like a film to the passage and closed up afterward, as if nothing had happened. After the first shock of dismay, they unanimously rushed to the door, but found it bolted on the outside. There was no other exit, and no means of giving an alarm. In this emergency, the demeanor of the Italian cardinals set a bright example of their ultramontane colleagues. "Bisogna pazienza," they said as they shrugged their shoulders. Nothing could exceed the mutual politeness of Cardinals Anno and Benno, unless that of the two who had sought to poison each other. The Frenchman was held to have gravely derogated from good manners by alluding to his circumstances, which had reached his ears while he was under the table. And the Englishman swore so outrageously at the plight of which he found himself that the Italians and there silently registered a vow that none of this nation should ever be a pope, a maxim which, with one exception, has been observed to this day. Lucifer, meanwhile, had repaired to Sylvester, whom he found arrayed in all his insignia of his dignity, of which, as he remarked, he thought his visitor had probably had enough. I should think so indeed, replied Lucifer, but at the same time I feel myself fully repaid for all I have undergone by the assurance of the loyalty of my friends and admirers, and the conviction that it is needless for me to devote any considerable amount of personal attention to ecclesiastical affairs. I now claim the promised boon, which it will be in no way inconsistent with thy functions to grant, seeing that it is work of mercy. I demand that the cardinals be released, and that their conspiracy against thee, by which I alone suffered, be buried in oblivion. I hoped you would carry them all off, said Gerbert, with an expression of disappointment. Thank you, said the devil. It is more to my interest to leave them where they are. So the dungeon door was unbolted, and the cardinals came forth sheepish and crestfallen, if, after all, they did less mischief than Lucifer had expected from them. The cause was their entire bewilderment by what had passed, and their utter inability to penetrate the policy of Gerbert, who henceforth devoted himself, even with ostentation, to good works. They could never quite satisfy themselves whether they were speaking to the Pope or to the devil, and when under the latter impression habitually emitted propositions which Gerbert justly stigmatized as rash, temerarious, and scandalous, they plagued him with allusions to certain matters mentioned in their interviews with Lucifer, with which they naturally but erroneously supposed him to be constant, and worried him by continual nods and titterings as they glanced at his nether extremities to abolish this nuisance, and the same time silent sundry unpleasant rumors which had somehow got abroad. Gerbert devised the ceremony of kissing the Pope's feet, which in a grievously mutilated form endures to this day. The stupefaction of cardinals on discovering that the Holy Father had lost his hoof surpasses all description, and they went to their graves without having obtained the least insight into the mystery. Well, that was kind of fun. Not as fun as the first one. One moment. I say, why don't we just go ahead and read? Let's go back here. Let's see where we are. Evening from Toronto. Why arsenic? And what happened to tea? I'm feeling under the weather. First time I caught your stream. Usually don't stay up this late. Bo, hello. Kathy Blixard, hello. Oh no, I was late. Did you answer my question already? Me and Diane are watching Thanks for Live. No, I haven't yet. That will have to be a video for another day, I think, my friend. Melissa R. says, love your story times. Good evening. Good evening. Fire Crystal says, hello. Lemon Juice, hi. Lucy Day, I'm married to a gin. Nice. Amy Edwards. Tammy Decker, I loved it. When you read is like a Disney story. I spent 11 years in a convent. The truths he opens the world are so realistic. To the day. What a great story time. Yes, I actually really quite enjoyed that one. I wonder how long this next one is. We've only got about 10 minutes. How long is this now? Oh, well, we'll do one more. Selections from the Screw Tape Letters, C.S. Lewis. My dear Wormwood. Oh, this is letter 20, by the way. My dear Wormwood, I note with great pleasure that the enemy has, for a time being, put a forcible end to your direct attacks on the patient's chastity. You ought to have known that he always does in the end, and you ought to have stopped before you reached that stage. For as things are, your man has now discovered the dangerous truth that these attacks don't last forever. Consequently, you cannot use again what is, after all, our best weapon, the belief of ignorant humans that there is no hope of getting rid of us except by yielding. I suppose you've tried persuading him that chastity is unhealthy. I haven't got a report from you on the young women in the neighborhood. I should like it at once. If we can't use his sexuality to make him unchaste, we must try to use it for the promotion of desirable marriage. In the meantime, I would like to give you some hint about the type of woman, I mean, the physical type, which he should be encouraged to fall in love with. Falling in love is the best we can manage. In a rough and ready way, of course, this question is decided for us by spirits far deeper down in the lower archery, lower class than you and I. It is the business of these great masters to produce in every age a general misdirection of what may be called sexual taste. This they do by working through the small circle of popular artists, dressmakers, actresses, and advertisers who determine the fashionable type. The aim is to guide each sex away from those members of the other with whom spiritually helpful, happy, and fertile marriages are most likely. Thus, we have now, for many centuries, triumphed over nature to extent of making certain secondary characteristics of the male, such as the beard, disagreeable to nearly all the females. And there is more than that than you might suppose. As regards the male taste, we have varied a good deal. At one time, we have directed it to the statuesque and aristocratic type of beauty, mixing men's vanity with their desires and encouraging the race to breed chiefly from the most arrogant and prodigal of women. Yet at another, we have selected an extra exaggeratedly feminine type, faint and languishing, so that folly and cowardice and all the general falseness and littleness of mind which go with them shall be the premium. At present, we are on the opposite tack. The age of jazz has succeeded the age of the waltz, and we now teach men to like women whose bodies are scarcely distinguishable from those of boys. Since this is a kind of beauty even more transitory than most, we thus aggravate the female's chronic horror of growing old, with many excellent results, and render her less willing and less able to bear children. And that is not all. We have engineered a great increase in the license which society allows to the representation of the apparent bathing beach. It is all fake, of course. The figures in the popular art actually pinched in and propped up and make them appear firmer and more slender and more boyish than nature allows a full-grown woman to be. Yet, at the same time, the modern world is taught to believe that it is being frank and healthy and getting back to nature. As a result, we are more and more directing the desires of men to something which does not exist, making the role of the eye in sexuality more and more important, and at the same time, making its demands more and more impossible. What follows you can easily forecast. That is the general strategy at the moment. But inside the framework, you will still find it impossible to encourage your patient's desires in one of two directions. You will find, if you look carefully into any human's heart, that he is haunted by at least two imaginary women, a terrestrial and infernal Venus, and that his desire differs qualitatively according to its object. There is one type for which his desire is such to be naturally amenable to the enemy, readily mixed with charity, readily obedient to marriage, colored all through with the golden light of reverence and naturalness, which we detest. There is another type which he desires brutally, and desires to desire brutally, a type best used to draw him away from marriage altogether, which, even within marriage, he would tend to treat as a slave, an idol, or an accomplice. His love for the first might involve what enemy calls evil, but only accidentally. The man would wish that he was not someone else, that she was not someone else's wife, and be sorry that he could not love her lawfully. But in the second type, he felt evil is what he wants. It is that tang in the flavor which he is after. In the face of it, the visible amenity or sulkiness or craft of cruelty, which he likes, and in the body something quite different from what he ordinarily calls beauty, something he may even in a sane hour describe as ugliness, but by which, by our art, can be made to play on the raw nerve of his private obsession. The real use of the infernal Venus is, no doubt, as prostitute or mistress, but if your man is a Christian, and if he has been well trained in nonsense about irresistible and all-excusing love, he can often be included to marry her, and that is very well worth bringing about. You will have failed as regards fornication and solitary vice, but there are other and more indirect methods of using man's sexuality to his undoing. And by the way, you are not only efficient but delightful. The unhappiness produced is very lasting and exquisite kind. Your affectionate uncle, Screwtape. I think that's where we'll end for tonight. We have maybe one more. Let's see where we are. Satan finds the new world. That's what's next. Yeah, I think we'll save that for next week. There's only one story next week, so I may bring about another book. My friend, where's that book? I was looking for that. I may make a slight departure for next week, because I will read this one. There's only one more story, Satan Finds the New World. But I thought I had that book up here, but I guess I left it downstairs. My friend wrote a book, and he wanted me to read it. So he wanted me to read it here. So with his permission, we'll do that. Anyway, thank you, everybody, for coming on. Thank you for all of your likes, your shares, your comments. Thank you for your beautiful presence. I do love you. Sweet, beautiful dreams. Good night.